you, Bobby, and good morning, everyone. I'm Ben David, District Attorney for New Hanover and Pender counties, and I'm so privileged under Article 4, Section 18 of our North Carolina Constitution to be the legal advisor for the law officers of New Hanover and Pender County, the more than 1,000 committed heroes in the 20 different police agencies that are really on those front lines. I've also worked for years with the federal authorities that are on this stage, and I think what Bobby just mentioned bears repeating. The 10th Amendment to our Constitution basically says that justice is inherently local. That means that the vast majority of what we do to keep you safe and to make sure that the bad guys get put away in the appropriate case will always be done at the state and local level. 95% of it comes through the courthouse right next door. Well, what about the courthouse that's down on the river? What about Water Street? Why are we here today to talk about this federal partnership? It's part of a larger strategic plan that we put in place now to deal with the scourge of the opioid epidemic. When we've said before that if everything's a priority, then nothing is, it bears repeating that our two priorities as prosecutors, my brother and I both share this philosophy in this 5-county area, is to first go after violent criminals and then career criminals who are committing any crime. And what we're doing is we're using the tool of the federal government and the vast resources that have that extraterritorial reach, the investigative grand juries and the enhanced sentencing of it, to go after that 5% that Bobby mentioned. The gangbangers, the ones that are trafficking fentanyl and heroin, the dealers who are peddling poison for profit, the ones that are killing 3 North Carolinians a week, the ones that are trafficking humans on Market Street, the ones that are the habitual felons breaking into your cars and your homes, the ones, in other words, who have information and who don't want to cooperate. You heard Bobby mention that. The best thing you can do if you're in trouble right now is to fully cooperate. You know, on the street they say that snitches get stitches, snitches get riches. Not only do they get paid for some of their cooperation, but their sentences can be dramatically reduced if they help us at an early stage and provide truthful assistance in doing that. If you get a plea offer from my office, I suggest you take it. Because if it goes federally, it's going to get a whole lot worse. And you know what? We now have the ability to direct a whole lot more into that system with the incredible resources that the New Hanover County Commissioners, and every one of them I might add is here, have given my office today. I first want to mention that this, again, is a part of a larger strategic plan. It started, and you heard about this, when my brother John became district attorney about 8 years ago. And we coordinated a regional approach to these epidemics. The sheriff, and I know John Ingram is here, and Ed McMahon formed a federal task force, for instance, working with our partners to really focus on heroin, but to focus with the state and local partners more than anything in their offices to continue making these drug arrests. We saw that with nuisance abatement, and Meredith Everhart, a former prosecutor in both of our offices, is here. She's the one that worked with us to shut down 6 marketplace motels if they didn't play ball and immediately raise their standards because there was trafficking of both humans and substances going on out of those places, and the crime rate was dramatically reduced through that civil injunction. We then looked at the gangs themselves and became the only city in North Carolina to go specifically after the gangs. I love the First Amendment and peaceful assembly, but I can't stand violent assembly. And so what we did is we said, you can't hang out with each other anymore. And if you do, you're arrested for that. Because the history has shown, and we had a 100-page complaint to prove it, that you're committing crimes in each other's presence. I'm confident that has been in place now for the last 6 months is reducing crime as well. And Daniel Thurston, who's again a former prosecutor, is leading that charge from the city attorney's office. The 20 prosecutors in my office, they handle 75,000 cases a year. That is 50,000 traffic offenses, which traffic is a problem and we need to deal with it, but also the 20,000 misdemeanors, and then the 5,000 felonies. So what's the 5% that goes down to Water Street? Well, again, it'll fall primarily into 2 big buckets. The violent criminals, like the gang dealers, the ones that are peddling poison for profit and have these organized networks. I love the Second Amendment, but you've lost the right to bear arms if you've been convicted of a felony in this town, and you know what? That means you should go to prison for that. And we get a lot more time going federally than we do in the state system, and so we're going to open up Water Street for business on that. We're also looking to make sure that, obviously, this opioid epidemic gets attacked as much as we can. Death by distribution, as Bobby mentioned, is a real issue for this state. Second-degree murder is a label that just doesn't seem to fit with most juries, because I understand that the dynamic that we're asking people to convict a dealer upstream conduct where you have a user who is willingly injecting themselves. You know what? Death by distribution is pretty easy to understand. We can get multiple years on that. So I'm asking the legislature right now in this short session, I will be in Raleigh later this week personally asking them, to say we need to change the title to death by distribution to mirror the federal laws. But as it relates to the way we investigate these crimes, bad guys don't respect jurisdictional boundaries, and many of them are outside of our city. So what have we said to them? Turn around if you're on I-40 or I-17, because you've come to a place where we're going to get $1 million bond for you for heroin or fentanyl if you're selling it or you're trafficking it. Ken Sarvis, our chief deputy with the sheriff's office, has some numbers for you on how we're doing since we announced that from the deck of the battleship. Many of these same leaders behind me now. We're going after point of source. We're going to continue to work with investigative grand juries at the federal level. We're going to find the people who are wreaking the most havoc in our communities and go after them with everything we can. This is a tough love approach. We are always going to fight for people in the throes of addiction, try to get them the treatment they need. We understand that this is a public health emergency and not just a criminal justice issue. But as for the dealers, as for the people who are creating violence in this community, there should be no issue about that. We're going to do everything we can to put them in prison. So what have we done? We've done two things. I first asked Bobby Higdon to hire Tim Severo. Now, Tim is someone who I've known for 25 years. We met in Winston-Salem when he was a young prosecutor and I was a young associate at a firm. He was one of the very first people I hired 14 years ago when I became the elected DA. He'd already been a prosecutor over there for nearly a decade. For this last 14 years, Tim has done a great job as a cross-sworn federal prosecutor, working with these laws to get maximum justice, and you've heard many of these cases. When harm befalls an officer, as it did with Rich Matthews when he was killed, when dealers were throwing out 5 pounds of marijuana, for instance, in a high-speed chase. I personally prosecuted the driver for second-degree murder and convicted him. But Tim took the 2 young men who were in the back seat with guns and with the drugs and put them in federal prison for 12 and 13 years each, in cases where we could have only got 2 or 3 years at the state system for. So in many respects, we've been doing this for a while. Tim has now been hired full-time federally and is going to be working on Water Street to have an office that works day in and day out with these federal investigators and these state and local authorities that are behind me. And then earlier this morning, the incredible New Hanover County Commission decided to listen to us and to fund something that is long needed. And that is a cross-sworn federal prosecutor specifically handling New Hanover County cases. And that's exactly what happened today. Murphy Averett, who has been in our community for nearly 20 years as a private attorney, is going to join our ranks to now be a prosecutor full-time in my office, to also work cross-sworn as a federal prosecutor with him, to continue this incredible pipeline of cases where we prioritize the worst of the worst. There's 51 federal prosecutors in Wake County. We now, for the first time in our history, have 2 living in our backyard, eating lunch with us, getting to know the local players, and really knowing this community. That's going to have a tremendous impact on the information sharing and what we are taking federally moving forward. And so I'm very confident that the place that you don't want to be, if you are a human trafficker or a drug trafficker, is right here in the 5th and 13th districts. And it's because of the incredible work going on by a lot of people. Results speak for themselves. Verdict needs to speak the truth. And so we're going to continue to seek verdicts that have larger messages, and we will remind you from time to time how we're doing. We want to be accountable. We believe in holding each other accountable, and we certainly do. But we're going to hold people who are breaking the law accountable too. And that's what this is. We are going to continue to do what we can to throw every resource at what I regard as the biggest issue for our community right now. And that is this opioid crisis and the violent criminals who are actually running it. We're in charge, not them, and that's the message today. So with that, I'm going to call on my brother John, who I know is going to introduce a couple of other folks before we answer any questions. Thank you.
Good morning. My name is John David. I'm the elected district attorney for Brunswick, Bladen, and Columbus counties. I was joined by many of these same law enforcement leaders about 10 weeks ago from the battleship North Carolina. And at that time, we were declaring a war, not just on drugs, but on drug dealers. because we recognize that within the drug game, we certainly have people who are into the grips of addiction, and we need to shift and treat their problem much more in medical terms and not just think of this in legal terms. But for those dealers, those people who are peddling poison for profit, we had a message for them, a very stern message, and that is the cost of business is going up. We are coordinated, we are united around the belief that this is a public health emergency, and we're going to do everything we can to put you out of business. That declaration came with it a cost, and I will tell you that the law enforcement leaders behind me have been putting teeth into that promise. In Brunswick County, in Bladen, and Columbus, where I'm proudly the district attorney, I will tell you that they've been working overtime to deal with the scourge of drugs and the interrelationship between drugs and violent crime. To be clear, a lot of these heroin dealers are also validated gang members, and they protect their profit and run their business with the use of violence. So in targeting this issue, we're actually doing a lot to deal with the problems that our U.S. Attorney discussed, dealing with the underlying spike in violent crime that is occurring in this country over the last 3 years. In the criminal justice system, they say if everything's a priority, then nothing's a priority. I will tell you our priority right now is taking an aggressive stance on this opioid epidemic, specifically heroin dealers, and letting them know that the cost of business is going up. A missing piece of the puzzle, I think, has always been a strong federal partner. We have benefited tremendously in the last year with having Bobby Higdon ascend to the position of U.S. Attorney for the Eastern District. For years in this district, I have been working closely with our federal partners, but there is a renewed emphasis on the Cape Fear region and the fact that this is the tip of the spear of this opioid crisis. Bobby certainly recognizes that. I will tell you that although we are making this announcement today and talking about the fact of our relationship, this is not a new relationship for any of us. Long before any of us were the leaders of our respective organizations, we enjoyed a professional trust. I've been working as a prosecutor in the Cape Fear region. Bobby, prior to his ascension, was a U.S. attorney, and my brother was an assistant district attorney prior to becoming the district attorney as well. And so this partnership today has been, in many respects, about 17 years in the making. And I believe that we are now very well positioned to identify the worst defendants and worst cases within the criminal justice system. To be clear, the federal tool allows us to make surgical strikes within the worst cases and the worst communities. And we are doing that. We are identifying who really needs to be singled out from the herd and pushed into the federal system where we can enjoy maximum punishment. We are strengthened further by some relationships that Ben has already alluded to. Two of my former prosecutors, Daniel Thurston and Meredith Everhart, now work with the city of Wilmington. We recognize that the solution to this opioid epidemic will take a coordinated regional response. Federal, state, and local to be sure, but now a federal prosecution. The answer to this problem of how we solve the opioid crisis is multifaceted. We recognize that the solutions exist largely outside of the criminal justice system. There must be prevention, there must be treatment, there must be rehabilitation. But to the extent that we need more aggressive enforcement, today marks a significant shift in our strategy. We are going to continue to engage the community in this solution. I'm so heartened to see so many members of our opioid task forces regionally in the crowd today. I would point out particularly Charlie Ray Peterson, who's not only one of our Bladen County commissioners, but also the head of our opioid task force. I'll be meeting on Thursday night. Our Brunswick County opioid task force, spearheaded by our Sheriff John Ingram, will be meeting tomorrow in Brunswick County. And so together with the civic leaders, the business leaders, the faith leaders, we are going to deal with this issue, again, on many different fronts. But today, let there be no mistake, to drug dealers, you need to know that the cost of business has gone up dramatically. There has never been a higher level of coordination than right now. And I will tell you that we are adding new soldiers to this fight every day. A crucial piece of that puzzle came to us in the form of our New Hanover County commissioners who had the wisdom to add that resource into my brother's office. I'll be making a similar request to the county commissioners in Brunswick County in the coming weeks. But I want to recognize at this time Chairman Woody White of the New Hanover County Commissioners to talk about their decision to join us in this crucial fight. Woody?
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I've been a federal practitioner for 24 years, and I remember Jane meeting you the first time as a 26-year-old lawyer when you walked in my office and said, when you have got a subpoena for your client. It's a very terrifying thing to hear as a young attorney. And since then, after working with Jane and her many colleagues for all these years, I can tell you something as a practitioner as to why it led the county to get involved in this. For 20 plus years, I've heard over and over and over again and seen the quiet grumblings of our OCDF task force members, prosecutors, roll their eyes when they have to drive to Fayetteville or Raleigh or Greenville for a first appearance on an arrest they just made. Or maybe they have a cooperating witness, somebody that has information that's very valuable, that's timely, that's sensitive, that needs to be acted upon today. But they have to go to Raleigh and do a debrief, or Johnston County at the bottom of the Smithfield County Jail. So before I comment briefly about what the county has done, Bobby, I'd like to say thank you, because this community, as long as I have been a member of this local bar, has asked every U.S.